Hey everybody, Josh Borowski here. I am going to try and solve once and for all the big mystery of what happened to the Mille Lacs Lake Muskie population. I think maybe, at least to me, it doesn't seem like maybe as big of a mystery as it does to everyone else. And I'm going to try to use some data and facts to kind of explain what I think happened. I also want to introduce Nolen. That's Nolen in the screen there. You can wave. Nolan's a musky nerd like me that likes to crunch data, and I got him along for the ride here to help explain a couple things at a certain point as well. And he actually helped me kind of put some of these charts and graphs I'm about to show you together. So I'm going to jump right into it here. What you're looking at right here is basically it's the 36 years through 2019 of muskie stocking since they started it on Lake Mille Lacs, okay? And it's broken down into four equal 9-year segments, okay? So, and you can see sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? You can see clearly there were a lot of fish, more than 45,000 put in between 1984 and 1992. And since then, you can look at the next three 9-year blocks and, not so much, right? And that's not an optical illusion, okay, that we were just looking at. The truth is there were actually more muskies stocked in those first 9 years than the following 27 years combined. So that's like how big of a discrepancy there is here in the stocking. And in fact, I also just want to point out, just in 1991 alone, there were 10,977 fingerlings stocked, okay, which is more than the whole like last 9-year segment on that bar graph that I just showed you, okay? So in 1 year, there's basically more put in than this whole like last 9-year run. And it's not too far away from, being more than these other 9-year runs either. Let's see here. So I'm going to jump into the next one. So I'm just going to kind of show you the same thing through, a couple different sets of lenses. This is also the stocking broken down, but instead of doing it in 9-year segments, it's in 4-year segments, but it still kind of shows you the same thing for the most part, right? But the one thing that it shows you that we couldn't see by doing the 9-year spans is there's a gap right here between 2000 and 2003 where there were just zero muskies stocked for 4 years. So that becomes kind of important in telling this story as well. And then I'm going to jump to the next one. This is basically that the same thing I just showed you, just in a line graph version. It's broken down in 4-year increments again, so you can kind of look at the slope of that line. And then I'm going to jump to the next one here, which we break it down even further into 2-year segments. I would love to do it in 1-year segments, okay? But the problem is with the stocking plans on a lot of lakes, including Mille Lacs, at some point when they start skipping years, it makes it hard to show a line graph like this because, basically every other year it goes down to zero and then goes all the way back up. Where if you get a 2-year average, you can have a nice steady line graph that kind of still tells you the story, right? And that's what this does here. But you can still see it's still the same. There's a big peak here, and then it kind of falls off. And then you can still see that gap where we got no fish stocked there. So now what I'm going to jump to is this is a graph of muskies caught on Lake Mille Lacs, recorded in the Muskies Inc. lunge log. Okay. And I know some people are like, oh, the lunge log isn't that reliable. People lie and blah, blah, blah. And I will be the first one to admit it's not like a perfect database. Okay. But I do find, and I do think that on the bigger bodies of water, like Mille Lacs, Lake Vermilion, lakes like that, people tend to be a lot more honest and report their catches, because it's like, even if they tell you what's going on, there's thousands and thousands of acres of water out there where you still got to go figure it out on your own, right? It's not like you're telling someone your dirty secrets about a little 200-acre lake that you're fishing, that everyone has access to or something. So, and also I'll add, I mean, we're not gonna, I'm trying to like keep this short and sweet, but I mean, there is a fair amount of the DNR data that mirrors this too through the years and shows the same thing in their Creel surveys. But anyway, you're looking at the catches here that are reported, and as you can see, and it's starting to see some similarities, right? Like with the graph that we're looking at and the shape of it versus what we were just looking at with stocking. And you can see that the catches start to climb, and they really climb, and they peak out in 2007, and then they just fall off a cliff in 2008, never to recover again. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to the next slide, which has that same one I just showed you, but I kind of wanted just to show you it right next to the stocking slide, okay? Because you can kind of look at what happened, and to me, it's kind of the classic case of, if you just look on the left, it's like, okay, here they are going in, okay? And then you look over here, and here's us catching them, here's them coming out. And now I'm going to jump into, this is where I'm going to get Nolen involved a little bit. So this is a table that I pulled from a Muskies Inc. calendar. And Nolen and I kind of figured out from looking at it that there's actually a little bit of a printing issue or a misprint at the top of the table. But Nolen, can you just tell me a little bit about what this graph or this table is kind of trying to explain to people or show?
Sure. Yep. This is based on a study that was done back in 1975, and they basically tracked the survival of the stocked fingerlings. So the titles on the top are just wrong, or they're sort of jumbled. That was a miscopying.
Mhm.
The bottom line is the left-hand column is the year of life. So half a year old to 1 year old, 1 year old to 2 year old. And the second column is the number of fish that are alive in the tracking. So they started with 1,000 that were, half a year old. And then by the next year, there were only 114. And the following year, there were 109. The following year, there were 104, and so on. So what it does is it gives you a pretty good idea of what percentage of the stockfish survive each year, and you could see, for example, here that a large, like about 95% of them survive those years 1 through 5. Each year, only 5 die out of roughly 100. But then once they get to be catching age, all of a sudden, 20 to 30% of them are dying, every year once they're in that catching range.
And we should also add, so this is old, right? This is from like
Yeah.
1975, and so when they got to that catching size, back then, in Wisconsin, they were probably getting harvested if they were of like the legal size, which wasn't very big back then. And so, we're definitely willing to accept that. I think that this probably looks a little bit different now, like in today's age, right? Like there's more catch and release going on, and the survival rates, there's less harvesting going on. There's still going to be delayed mortality, and you're probably those first year classes of fish are probably still going to have some of the same struggles, right? I mean, it's not like they're being fished for; they just have the surviving,
Survival, yeah.
yeah. But anyway, I'm going to jump to um, this is a mortality model that Nolen kind of created, like looking at that. And then I guess when we talked, we kind of looked at a few other, like
hmm
researching online. There's differing opinions, right, for
hmm
what the survival rate is. And didn't you kind of go middle of the road on this a little bit,
Yeah,
Nolan?
yeah. We looked at the one on the previous slide, took into account that was older, so the survival rate's probably a hair low on for the adults. But then also there was one from Michigan that was based on research where the survival rates were lower considerably. So what we've got here is basically kind of middle ground. And the one number that I think is based in like Minnesota modern muskie research is the survival rate of 1/3 in the first year. So
Mhm.
the way the model is set up, there's a survival rate going from each, over each year, just like we looked at in the previous slide. So the first year I've got it at 0.33, or 1/3 of the fingerlings survive to the next year. That's based on the DNR's ratio of stocking 3 fingerlings to 1 yearling to get the same number of adults. And then after that, those numbers are just based, they're kind of middle ground in between the available, research-based numbers that we found. Um, it's worth noting here too that the results that we are going to look at, the overall number of fish changes a little bit if you change these more survival rates, but the story that it tells doesn't change. I'll maybe say a couple words about that when we actually get to that
Yeah,
slide.
I think it's the next slide here too. So, and I'm gonna try and like, I think I got this nailed down, right? But so you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nolan. But basically, what we're looking at here is this is a graph of, basically plugging in those mortality rates that you just showed us into the actual stocking numbers that have been
Yep,
stocked in Mille
yep.
Lacs.
It's only stock fish, and it just basically calculates every year how many fish of each age are left based on the mortality rate, and then groups it into age groups.
Right. And so these bottom three lines, it's like the green line is the older fish that are,
Hmm.
15 and older. And
Yep.
then the orange ones, 10 to 14-year-olds, the red ones, 5 to 9-year-olds.
Hmm.
And this blue line basically represents the combination. Like if you combined all three of those lines, that shows you, so this blue line is basically the whole kind of somewhat fishable size population of muskies,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
Exactly.
and so like one thing that I just want to note from looking at this is, again, we see this big peak, right? And then we see it, you know, taper off, and it really kind of starts to fall really hard here. And it bottoms out right here in 2008, which is pretty similar to what we actually saw happen when we were fishing out there. And also this pretty much mirrors as far as like it bottoming out in that time frame, with the lunge log catches.
Hmm.
The other thing that's kind of worth noting is this green line here, is, as the population was falling, that but also was the time frame though when there was the highest population of older big fish in the
Hmm.
lake. So they uh, represented a higher portion of the overall population than kind of any
Hmm.
other point in this line graph.
Yeah, I
Correct?
mean, on that graph, there's about twice as many age 15 plus fish, big old fish, than there are age 5 to 9.
Yep.
You
And
know,
I remember that time fishing out there. We were just catching big ones and there were no small ones, right?
yeah.
Um,
And again,
so
can I add
go
a
ahead.
couple things here, quick?
Sure.
So, first thing I want to say is, based on the mortality model, if you adjust the rates, the shapes of the curves don't change, just the height. So it basically tells the same story that in that time frame when it peaked, there were a bunch of big old fish and not very many young ones. Uh, the second thing to note is that this does not have suppression in it from the existing population. So this dip was probably worse in real life. The younger fish were probably worse than what is being indicated on this graph. Um,
Right. And what Nolan means by suppression, for people who aren't familiar with it, is it's just kind of the theory that basically, the, the initial muskies that are stocked in a lake to begin with, like they don't have other muskies to compete with, right? But once there are muskies present, when, at some point the lake might reach like carrying capacity, right? Or it's just going to be, the more adult muskies there are in the lake, it's probably going to be more difficult for those fingerlings that are stocked after that point to survive. And so that survival rate that we talked about might be like altered and be harder for them to survive. That's pretty much what you're saying, right?
yep. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So I did just want to show again, like this is the catches. We already looked at it once, but again, you can see just like in the model that we just showed, it pretty much bottoms out and falls off a cliff here in 2008. It drops even further after that, but it pretty much shows the same cliff and the same general time frame. And I know some people kind of have, the attitude of, well, they don't all die at once, right? Well, and I get that. I mean, I think there's some truth to that too. But one really interesting tidbit that I found was I was looking at a 2006 Creel survey from Mille Lacs where they talked to anglers, and asked whether they've caught muskies, released them, whatever. And in 2006, they actually recorded 80 muskies, okay, that were harvested and kept. And the real mind blowing thing, the average size of those fish was 36 pounds. Okay. Which means that's just 80 giants. Like those were probably all like, I mean, really high upper 40 to low 50-inch fish just plucked out of the lake. Right. And basically, I don't, it'd be interesting. I'll have to see if I can get my hands on, I don't know if they did a Creel survey in 2007. I think, I'm pretty sure they usually don't do them back to back years like that, but maybe on a lake like Mille Lacs, they would. But, if there were, a bunch of fish, there was even more fish caught, in the catches in the lunge log in 2007. So it could be that, there were more than 80 muskies harvested the next year too, right? But I mean, I think it's safe to say there were probably some more. And when you kind of look at, we talked about how there was just a bunch of really big fish in the lake then. We talked about that, right? Well, after 2006, right? I mean, that kind of plucked a bunch out. And if there are much more plucked in 2007, that's just going to make that whole cliff that we talked about happen even more so as well. And then you also have to add in, and the model kind of showed it, but keep in mind that, there was also that 4-year gap where there were just no fish coming through the system at all to replace any fish that were taken out of there. And so, this kind of just leads me to my last slide. And I know I'm just kind of keeping it simple, but to me, like what all this data suggests is that, we had like 9 fantastic years of muskie stocking on Lake Mille Lacs. And in the end, it produced about 9 fantastic years of fishing on Lake Mille Lacs. Okay. And since then, we've had 27 years of not very good stocking. And so, when I look into my crystal ball, like you look at this graph, I mean, I don't like see anything changing. And the sad part is, I mean, really, we're looking at what's been put in there, but there's a lag on, what we're fishing for. So we still have like 13 more years of fishing to go on the 27 years of the bad stocking, right? So if we want to see a change, like we need to make the change now. And a big part of why I made this video is I know that right now the Minnesota DNR is actually accepting public input about their future muskie management plan and the stocking plan for Mille Lacs. And unfortunately, what's written in the proposal plan that they have right now, there's basically a statement in there that says something along the lines of that, that the muskie anglers are currently like satisfied with the status quo of the way it's being stocked and managed. And so no change is needed. So the plan is just to continue doing, this little stumpy bar graph over here that we're looking at right now, which really makes me sad. And so I wanted to get this video out and I wanted you guys to see it because, and obviously people are going to see this after the time, but I'm going to put a link up in the video description of if you want to give the DNR some input and, you want to go to bat and say that you'd like to see the stocking increased. I'm going to include a link there to do it. Once the time frame has passed to like, act, I'll probably pull that link off just because it's not going to do you any good anyway after that point. But I'm obviously going to leave the video up because I think it tells a story. And by the way, if you like this video, click the little like thing and, and if people really seem interested in this type of subject matter, I mean, I have a lot of data, right, on all of these lakes. And I could really do a whole series because, in my mind, there's a bigger picture that started with Mille Lacs. And Mille Lacs was kind of the too big to fail story. It was the biggest stocked muskie lake in the state of Minnesota. And it could consume and swallow up the highest volume of fishing pressure of musky boats, right? And when things went sour there, like all of those boats had to leave and go somewhere else. And so they went everywhere else in Minnesota, right, where there was good fishing. And it kind of started to create another set of problems, which maybe I'll tackle with another video if you guys seem to like this one. So thanks for listening. Nolen, thanks for joining me. Do you have anything to add, or are you good signing off?
No, I think that's pretty clear.
Sounds good, man. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the
Yeah.
help.
Yep, no problem.